Question number 2, Stuart Smith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance. What recent reports has he received on the performance of the New Zealand economy?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, the June quarter balance of payments reported yesterday and today's statistics published the June quarter GDP. The measure of GDP expanded for the 18th consecutive quarter, rising 0.4% in the 3 months, taking the annual growth rate to 2.4% and annual average growth at 3%. The current account balance was a deficit equivalent to 3.5% of GDP for the year ended June 30th, and New Zealand's net liability position, which measures the value of our overseas assets less our overseas liabilities, equivalent to 62.2% of GDP, the smallest net liability position recorded since 1990.
Supplementary question, Stuart Smith.
What sectors drove the overall expansion in economic activity in the last quarter?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, the service industries, which comprise around 2/3 of the economy, expanded by 0.5%. Primary industry activity rose by 0.2%. This is a pretty solid pace of activity for an economy adjusting to the reduction in dairy income, and this kind of growth is providing sustainable opportunities for new jobs and higher incomes.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
In light of his newfound interest in quarterly GDP figures, can he confirm that it is correct that GDP growth per capita in the first 2 quarters of this year is the worst since 2011?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I wouldn't be surprised. New Zealand has a fast rising population because of the confidence of so many New Zealanders who've decided to stay home and New Zealanders who are coming home, and at the same time the economy's softened. So it's pretty obvious that per capita GDP is not going to be growing fast and may be shrinking at the moment.
Supplementary.
Order. Supplementary question, Stuart Smith.
What reports has he received on the outlook for the economy?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, last week the Reserve Bank set out its latest quarterly economic forecasts, which expect over the next 3 years growth of 2.2%, 2.8% and 3.2% through to March 2018. Now, this growth will be underpinned by the benefits of a significantly lower exchange rate and interest rates which are, if not at, certainly headed towards the lowest interest rates in 50 years. So that's a reasonably solid outlook.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Is he satisfied that, based on figures released today, exports as a percentage of GDP are at their lowest levels since 1997?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, no, we're not satisfied. In fact, part of the energy of this government is its relentless drive for a brighter future for New Zealand.
Supplementary question, Stuart Smith.
What does the Reserve Bank forecast for employment?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, job creation is pretty important for our households and communities. New Zealand's recorded 11 consecutive quarters of employment growth, with 69,000 more jobs created in the past year, and the Reserve Bank expects continued employment growth of between 1% and 2% over the next 3 years. It expects that the historically high labour force participation rate will persist, that is, we'll continue to have a large proportion of our working population available for work.
Question number 3, the Honourable Annette King.